Today I would like to address a people with an incredibly rich history and heritage, a people that Israel considers a partner in building a better future in the Middle East, the Iranian people. Unfortunately, the Iranian people are ruled by a regime that remains the biggest threat to peace and security in the region. The regime has proudly announced that it is enriching more uranium than before the disastrous Iran deal. It supports and funds terror instead of investing in its own people. Its forces shoot live ammunition at protesters. The regime outright lied to the international community to cover up its fatal actions that took the lives of 176 passengers and crew aboard the Ukrainian air flight. It is encouraging to see that more and more countries are taking steps to hold the regime accountable. But there is still much more that can and must be done. It is inspiring to witness the Iranian people, the brave Iranian people, who have been oppressed by their own government for decades, fight back. The Iranian people are risking their lives by taking to the streets and demanding their rights. I would like to take this opportunity to speak to the Iranian people directly, to our Persian neighbors. You have a tremendously rich heritage that you should be proud of. Since the time of the Achaemenid Empire in 550 BCE, the Persian people have made vital contributions. You, the Iranian people, you gave the world its first declaration of human rights and racial equality, which freed slaves and gave people the right to choose their own religion. You, the Iranian people, created the world's first taxation system and postal service. You, the Iranian people, you invented the world's first water supply system, refrigerator, algebra, animation, chess, and the list goes on. It is incredible to think of the great contrast between your rich history and your current regime. It is absurd that the people who invented human rights and protected the freedom of religion are ruled by a regime that tramples both. This absurdity has brought you to stand up for your heritage, to stand up for your country's rich history, and while the Islamic Republic is doing all that it can to silence your voice, you stand strong and you stand proud. You are not deterred by violence or by the threat of imprisonment. You do not allow the violation of your freedom of speech to prevent you from spreading your message. I say today to the Iranian people, Israel darkanara shomast. Israel is on your side. You are protesting because you are tired of being lied to by your government. Mr. President and members of the Council, allow me to share with you one story of the brave Iranian people. Nikta Asfandani had the courage to join the protest in November and fight for her future. During one of the protests, tragically, she was shot and killed by the regime. She was 14 years old. And if that wasn't enough of a tragedy, the regime then tried to cover up her death. At the beginning, they first announced that there was a different cause to her death, and then they forced her parents to say that she died from poisoning. It appears that all options are on the table with the regime, except for taking responsibility. The recent cover-up of the downing of the Ukrainian air passenger plane is just the tip of the iceberg, but it was enough to chip away at the regime's propaganda machine. Jaler Jabari was an anchor on Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting, a TV and radio company whose head is appointed directly by the supreme leader. Following the Ukrainian airline incident, Jabari resigned. After announcing her resignation, she wrote to the Iranian people, "Forgive me for the 13 years I told you lies." The Iranian regime lies to its people and it lies to the international community. It lies about its nuclear program and it lies about its terror-driven regional ambitions. The Iranian people know, and it is time that the international community recognize that the Iranian regime is deceitful and cannot be trusted. Mr. President, the Iranian people are protesting because they are tired of the regime neglecting their economy and instead spending billions to their proxies. Iran suffers from serious infrastructure problems, a weak banking sector, and widespread corruption. It is expected that by March of this year, 57 million Iranians will be living below the absolute poverty line. As a result, Iran is experiencing the world's greatest brain drain. Every year, around 150,000 of Iran's best engineers, pilots, doctors, and other highly sought-after professions leave Iran. They look for a place where they can work and live in freedom of the fear of the Islamic Republic. And yet, the regime continues to neglect its people and waste its money on violence, on terror. Since the outbreak of the conflict in Syria, Iran has spent at least $30 billion to support Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Every year, it transfers $700 million to Hezbollah and $100 million to Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Those amounts pale in comparison to the estimated $100 billion that the regime has spent on its nuclear program. There is no doubt that that money could be better spent domestically, but we all know the regime doesn't care about the Iranian people. Mr. President, the Iranian people are protesting because they are tired of being shot at by their own government. They are tired of the violence. In line with the Iranian regime's attempts of covering up its crimes, the number of civilians who lost their lives in protests since November 2019 is unclear, but some reports indicate as many as 1,500. 1,500 Iranians killed by their government for exercising their right to freedom of expression. The Islamic Republic's violence is not contained to Iran, and neither is the criticism against it. The regime has used its proxies to spread violence and terror throughout the region. During the recent Security Council debate on the implementation of the UN Charter, we all heard from our colleague, the representative of Yemen. His country is experiencing the world's worst humanitarian crisis. He blamed the war in his country on, and I quote, Houthi militias supported by the Iranian regime. He spoke out against the regime. The Islamic Republic spreads violence within and outside its borders, and its people have had enough. Mr. President, the Islamic Revolution stripped the Iranian people of their rights and turned them into pawns in the regime's plan for regional domination. They are victims of the regime. It must be clear, the campaign against Iran's nuclear aspirations, its ballistic missile program, and its regional agenda is a campaign against the Iranian regime, not the Iranian people. We must empower the Iranian people. Israel sees the Iranian people as partners for a better, safer,